Hey there, YouTube, and welcome to the Ontario Western YouTube channel. I'm Chris, and the Ontario Western is my freelance railroad. This is one of the first videos I'm going to do about it. If you listen to the Iron City podcast, I was on the second episode talking about my freelance stuff. I've been doing model railroading ever since I was little. Started with a N-scale Bachmann set in the early 90s and been in N-scale ever since. I do dabble in other scales occasionally. I have some HO, some Z, even some O gauge. But this video is going to focus on the concept of my freelance railroad. I've been working on this concept for years, and it's been in my head for a long time, and now that I have my own house, I can finally build my own layout, a full-size layout of what I want to do. So I guess we'll start out off here with a little bit of a history lesson. This is the Rome, Watertown, and Ogdensburg Railroad, which is the early predecessor of the Ontario and Western. It was started in 1861 here in Rome, and it started connecting all these towns up through here. And then in 1875, it bought the Lake Ontario Shore Railroad, which had gone bankrupt, and that connected all the towns here along the south shore of Lake Ontario. And in 1891, the railroad had signed a 99-year lease with the New York Central, and in 1913 it was officially merged into the New York Central system. So the section I'm mostly focusing on for my freelance is the old Lake Ontario shore section, from Oswego, New York, all the way to Niagara Falls. And at one point, the RW&O did have passenger trackage rates over the Lehigh Valley from Niagara Falls into Buffalo. And at one point, they even shared yard in Suspension Bridge, but by the time they finished it, they had already signed the lease with New York Central, so it was kind of redundant. They built it with enough capacity for two railroads, but Lehigh Valley only was able to fully utilize about half of it. And in the early 1950s, there was a whole bunch of urban renewal projects going on, grade crossing eliminations, and Lehigh Valley abandoned that yard and built a new one adjacent to the current CSX Niagara Falls yard in Niagara Falls. So we'll take that map out of here. This is one of the New York Central timetable from 1946. You can focus a little bit closer in here on what we're actually going to do. So, in my timeline, Penn Central never happens. We'll just say that, in a way, somehow Palpatine returned. If anybody knows Star Wars, they'll get that reference. Just for reasons that we're not going to go into, that I haven't really thought about. Just Penn Central didn't happen. They remained two separate companies, and they both were able to figure stuff out and, not end up in the bad shape that they were in. But as, things went on, things started, to turn south for the railroads regardless. In the 70s, despite their best efforts, they still had to spin off certain lines that were either low traffic or kind of redundant with other lines. So in the late 70s, New York Central wanted to spin off the Ontario branch from Oswego to Niagara Falls. In reality, there was some traffic still on the extreme west end. In Model City, there was Chemtrol, which was the predecessor for chemical waste management, which was I don't know how to say it. They treated chemical waste, and they got tank cars in by rail of waste, and they treated it. And in Ransomville, there was a sizable ag waste. Wilson, there was a salad dressing plant. In Alberta, which is between Wilson and Ransomville, there was a allied chemical plant which made anhydrous aluminum chloride, which was used in making aluminum. In Burt, there was a team track that was used. Appleton, there wasn't much. West Somerset, which is about where they built the new Somerset power plant in the 80s. That'll play into it in a little bit here. And in Barker, there was a Bird's Eye frozen food plant. As you got closer to Rochester and Hamlin, there was the Duffy Mott plant. And I believe in Kendall, there was a cold storage that was still shipping by rail. But eventually, the Duffy Mott plant was moved out to Williamson, where they built a new plant. So there wasn't really much on this stretch of the line. So in my world, most of this was abandoned, but the Ontario Western bought up the section from Niagara Falls out to Barker. And then when they built the Somerset power plant, they were given money to revitalize the track and road bed to be able to handle the unit coal trains down to the power plant. One of the other part of the Ontario Lines family was the Ontario Midland, and that services pretty much from Rochester out to Oswego. And a lot of the same chemical plants and food processing plants along the line. But we actually still go into Oswego, service the port of Oswego. What else? And the shop, still use the shop complex at West Yard to service the Ontario Lines locomotives. So, moving on into the future, in 1996, Conrail put this line up for sale. This is the Falls Road from Lockport, which would actually be on this side of the canal, the yard, out to Brockport, and the line ends roughly after Brockport. Conrail tore the track up the rest of the way into Rochester. But in my timeline, the Ontario Lines bought the Falls Road and merged it in the Ontario Western Division from Lockport all the way to Rochester, and then now we can run through trains from West Yard and Oswego all the way through Rochester, then via trackage rights on the Rochester and Southern, the old B&O line, up to the coal dock in Rochester, then over through Lockport, and then we'll interchange with New York Central in Lockport. And then we can also send locomotives from this section of the Ontario Western to Lockport, then go to service in Oswego at the shops. So, as going back to the power plant part, New York Central brings the coal up from Pennsylvania on the line from that runs through Geneva down to the coal fields, where it gets the train from the Buffalo and Susquehanna, which is another one of my short line railroads. Buffalo and Susquehanna hands it off to the New York Central. They bring it up to Lyons, across the main line, Then from Rochester, it goes across the Falls Road to Niagara Falls, then down the escarpment, across the Ontario Western, and then to the power plant in Somerset, and reverse routing back to the coal fields after they're with the empties. I think that's about all of it. Now I'm gonna take over to my layout and I'll show you some of the locomotive and cabooses that I have for the Ontario Western. This is locomotive 578 of the Ontario Western. Was originally a nickel plate C420. It's still in more or less nickel plate livery. This was one of the first ones on the property in 1979. And this is an ex-Frisco caboose transfer cab that they still use at number 1306. A lot of the locomotives I have are ex and nickel plate or Norfolk Western locomotives. My timeline, they were selling off a lot of these locomotives, especially after the nickel plate was merged in the Norfolk Western. So that railroad was able to pick them up cheap, and they still run fairly good. This locomotive is pretty much assigned to Niagara Falls and runs down the escarpment, servicing all the industries on the former Hojack line from Niagara Falls down to Barker. Here's two more locomotives. These are two ex-N&W RS11s, number 343 and 348. These locomotives are assigned to Lockport and run local traffic and out of Lockport to Rochester and work the yard in Lockport. Being that it's a short line, I didn't want all the locomotives to look exactly the same. So these ones are a little different. As you can see, 343 still has its white N&W number, and it was retrucked. It's got silver trucks on it, and then 348 still has its original gold number from the N&W, and these run real good together. As for the models themselves, I stripped the old lettering off, put my own decals on there from CMR Products for the Ontario lines and Ontario Western, and painted the ladders and grab irons and the trucks. I'll just roll this train across, and we'll bring out the road power that runs between Lockport and Oswego. Here are two high cab or high hood C420s. I'm sure some people recognize the paint scheme on number 420. In my world, the Ontario lines bought this from the Livonia Avon in Lakeville. My story is that they were upgrading to the 425s, and this was surplus, so the Ontario lines bought it. And 413 is a ex N&W locomotive, and these two locomotives run the road freight between Oswego and Lockport. And as for the caboose, there is also one assigned to Lockport. These were actually Atlas Alaska Railroad cabooses that I relettered. The paint scheme already fit real nice with the railroad, so I got a couple of them to go with the transfer cab. One last thing I wanted to go over before I end the video was just some of the industries that I plan on having on the layout. So we'll start here for the Ontario Western section for the old Hojack. The modeled portion will be starting around Ranceville and going to Wilson. But although we're not going to model it, the tank cars from the that go to Chemtrol for treatment in Model City will be carried on the train down to Ranceville, spotted on the passing track in Ranceville. Then on the return trip from Barker will be picked up and then switched. And then in Ranceville, there will be a cold storage and the Agway type business, fertilizer, grain in and out. And then the cold storage will have vegetables and other produce being shipped out in mechanical reefers. In Alberta, at the chemical plant, uh, they take in chlorine in tank cars from Hooker Chemical. So those will be switched in Alberta. And in Wilson, I'm going to do freelance a little bit more. I will be modeling the Pfeiffer salad dressing plant and going to be moving the Mayer Brothers apple juice juice plant from Somerset to Wilson, just to add some more operational interest. Uh, and that'll be the modeled portion. But the train will continue on into a staging yard, and that's where we'll hold cars for the Burt Team Track, and which will Newfane Lumber will utilize the team track, so there'll be wood wood delivered in boxcars and center beam flats. And then in Barker, we'll get the mechanical reefers and eventually cryotrans reefers, depending on which era, either the early 1990s or late 1990s and early 2000s. Also, in the staging yard, we'll be able to hold an empty and loaded Somerset coal train. As for the Falls Road in Lockport, which will be serviced by the New York Central, is probably Junction Road scrap and the GM Harrison's radiator plant just outside of Lockport. And then in Lockport, there'll be a yard, a flour mill, which was used to be Robin Hood Flour, then International Multi Foods, and I'm also there used to be, well, still is. It's Allegheny Technologies now, which is they make steel alloys. Back in the day, it used to be Simmons Steel and Saw, which they used to make steel for their saw blades and other types of steel alloys like stainless steel and whatnot. So that plant will be on the line. And then going west, the model portion for the Falls Road will just be around Lockport. So there'll be a couple other small industries like maybe a cement facility, transfer facility, maybe a box factory. There's a Jamestown container in Lockport. I haven't exactly picked all the industries for Lockport yet. But those trains will also go around the layout and enter into the same staging yard. The local will. There were other Agways and stuff out this way, and Braxner. There's a Braxner factory out Medina way. I think they make brake pads or parts for brake pads or something. I'll put that on the line. And there's a FMC fertilizer plant in Middleport, so there'll be traffic for that. And just some other cold storages. I believe there's another frozen food plant out Brockport way. So just a lot of chemical and food traffic. During the early 90s, when the Central still owns the line, I'll probably run a through freight and maybe a through auto rack train for some operational interest. And then on uh, the Ontario Western side will just be the local service in these industries. So, I've been wanting to do this video for a while. Finally got around to doing it after the uh, freelance week on the second section podcast page. I'm going to put this up there because they had the freelance forum out at the Colorado Railroad Museum last weekend, and I just got back from the Altoona N Scale weekend, and I got a lot of stuff for the layout there. I'm also putting together T-track stuff for. I started up Buffalo Central T-track, so you can also see some of my stuff there. I'll be posting some of that on the channel as well. What else? Check out the Iron City Facebook page. I post a lot of stuff there. And this is my first time really doing a video like this, so don't expect a lot of production quality on these videos. I'm using my iPhone and some holder I bought at Walmart, so this isn't a big high dollar operation here. And like I say, I got a face for radio and a voice for silent movies, so if you don't like the way I sound, I don't blame you. I'm just doing these because I want to. I'll be doing updates and stuff as the layout progresses, and other projects I got going on. So, anyways, I appreciate everybody listening, and I also want to thank the guys at 1810 Designs for doing my Ontario Western Herald. It turned out really great, and that's the Herald that you saw at the beginning of the movie in the opening title. So, anyways, like, subscribe, share, and we'll see you guys further on down the line. Take it easy.